The windows shook before anyone understood why. A low thrum, steady, growing louder until the chandelier above the dining table swayed and the curtains lifted from the draft. My mother's hand froze on the tablecloth, knuckles pale. Stephanie's wineglass rattled against fine china. James glanced at his watch as if time itself could explain the sound. Helicopter blades, cutting through the quiet of our parents' neighborhood. Minutes earlier, their words had been sharper than any machine. Stephanie sliding a gift card across the table. A few professional clothes for job interviews, Allison. You'll look the part. James tapping his binder, declaring, premium care comes with premium costs. You can contribute a token amount. And the smirk when he offered me an entry-level job at his firm, like a lifeline to someone drowning. Couch surfing. That's what they thought I was doing at 32. My sister's pity. My brother's superiority. Their assumptions stacked so high I could barely breathe beneath them. I'm Allison, 32 years old. For a decade, I've let them believe I was barely scraping by. They judged my car, my clothes, my modest choices. They never asked, never looked deeper. What they don't know is that the company I built was sold for $50 million. What they don't know is that I already secured the best care for our parents through a foundation I personally funded. The sound outside, the helicopter bending the maple branches I used to climb, was just the beginning of their education. I looked at James, at that knowing smirk, at Stephanie, pearls glinting, hand clutching Andrew's arm, at my mother torn between worry and judgment. Every slight, every dismissal, every "you could have been successful" burned through me, but this time I didn't swallow it. I stood slowly, smoothing the sleeve of my faded sweater, the air vibrating through the floorboards. The chandelier flickered as if even the light had caught its breath. You were right, James, I said evenly. I don't own a car. 5 pairs of eyes turned toward me, confusion mounting as the blades roared overhead, shaking the glassware. I stepped toward the door, the curtains snapping against the window pane. My ride is here. The morning light in my loft was dim, gray clouds pressing against the windows. I stood in front of my closet, scanning rows of tailored dresses and designer suits, then sliding past them to pull out something else. A sweater, soft with age, its cuff worn thin. Faded jeans that had traveled with me since my first startup days. Sneakers whose soles had thinned from years of sidewalks. I laid them out on the bed beside an old duffel bag, frayed at the seams. The bag looked out of place against the clean lines of my apartment, the glass desk, the steel lamps, the art I had collected during trips abroad. You're worth $50 million, Margot said from the doorway, arms folded, her head tilted like she was still trying to process the sight. And you're dressed like a college kid heading home for Thanksgiving. I zipped the duffel. Because this is how they expect me to arrive. She frowned. And you're taking a commercial flight instead of the company jet? Because this is the image they have of me, I replied, tying my hair back into a ponytail. I'm not ready to disrupt it yet. On the flight, I stared at the clouds, wondering why I clung to the disguise. Part of it was habit, part of it was strategy, but mostly it was because their judgment still cut, even after all these years. The taxi from the airport rumbled through Cedar Springs. The town was frozen in time. The hardware store where Dad used to buy nails, the ice cream shop where we celebrated school awards, the park where I had once dreamed up my first business plan, sketching ideas on the back of a notebook, while kids pushed swings and shouted across the monkey bars. Everything smaller now, preserved in amber, while my world had expanded beyond recognition. When the taxi pulled into the driveway of the white Colonial with blue shutters, I gripped the handle tighter. The maple tree, older but still towering. Mom's garden lining the path, carefully tended despite her fall. Before I could knock, the door swung open. James stood there, sweater pressed, watch gleaming. Finally, he said, checking the time. Did your flight get delayed? Or did you have to take the bus from the airport? His eyes traveled down to my sneakers, up to my duffel. A flicker of satisfaction crossed his face. Good to see you too, James, I said, forcing a brief hug. How are Mom and Dad? As well as can be expected. He took the bag from my hand, his grip firm, the gesture somewhere between courtesy and judgment. I've been here since yesterday, setting everything up. Stephanie and Andrew arrive tomorrow. You're in your old room, of course. Nothing's changed there. Inside, Dad was dozing in his recliner, thinner than I remembered. Mom moved slowly in the kitchen, her smile bright when she spotted me. Allison, sweetheart. She hugged me, then paused, eyes traveling over my sweater. You look... Her lips pressed together, searching for something kind. Healthy. Are you eating enough on your budget? You know you can always call if you need help with groceries. I'm fine, Mom, I said softly. Tell me about your recovery. James hovered nearby, binder already tucked under his arm, flipping to show charts and printouts about care facilities. The sound of paper hitting the table, a heavy thump, felt like punctuation to his authority. We'll go through the details tomorrow, Kina, he said, his tone like a boardroom presentation. But the costs are significant. The kind of quality care they need isn't inexpensive. His eyes flicked to me, lingering. That evening, Mom insisted on cooking, though she could barely stand. James waved her off, announcing he'd arranged for meal delivery. The spread was restaurant perfect. Roast chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, artisan bread. Mom marveled at it, praising James's generosity. The doorbell rang. Stephanie swept in, Andrew trailing behind with shopping bags. She was flawless. Pearls, tailored dress, blonde hair, styled as if the airport had a salon. We're here, she declared, kissing Mom carefully. And we brought gifts. She handed out packages like she was hosting a gala. Scotch for Dad, a silk scarf for Mom, a leather portfolio for James. Then she turned to me. And for you, Allison? Her smile faltered briefly before recovering. She handed me a small bag, inside a gift card. I noticed last time your wardrobe could use refreshing, she said. This should help with job interviews. I slipped the card into my pocket. How thoughtful, I said evenly. We all want to see you succeed, she replied, patting my arm. Speaking of success, Andrew just made partner. We're renovating the kitchen, Italian marble. Dinner conversation became a parade of their achievements. James's promotion, Stephanie's gala fundraiser, Andrew's golf tournament. When the spotlight turned to me, it came as pity. So what is it you do again? Stephanie asked, pouring herself more wine. Small business solutions, I said vaguely. James cut in. I know people who need basic websites. Nothing major, but it could provide steady income. More reliable than gig work. I forced a smile. I appreciate that. Dad looked up. Still in that tiny apartment? The one with the noisy neighbors? That was years ago, I said carefully. I have a comfortable place now. Comfort is relative, Stephanie laughed. Remember when Allison thought success meant buying name-brand cereal instead of generic? They chuckled. I clenched my jaw. The next morning, James transformed the living room into a boardroom. Projector humming, slides flicking across the wall, images of manicured grounds, luxury facilities, smiling staff, and crisp uniforms. These are the top care options, he said, voice smooth, confident. Of course, premium care comes with premium costs. The bottom line figure filled the screen, digits glowing in the dim room. Mom gasped softly. This is the gap between their retirement income and the actual costs, James continued. Stephanie and I have calculated how to handle most of it. That leaves 15%, about $1,200 a month. He glanced at me. Allison, Stephanie said gently, if that's too much, maybe you could contribute in other ways. Visit more often. Provide personal care. Perhaps $500 would be more manageable, James added. We can adjust to cover the rest. How generous. My cheeks burned. Dad looked at me, eyes clouded. Do you even have a steady job now? Last we talked, you were between projects. James jumped in. Actually, there's an opening at my company. Modest salary, but real stability. I could put in a word. A real job with a real company, Stephanie echoed, smiling. The projector hummed. The binder snapped shut with a decisive clap. Their narrative was sealed. I was the family failure. I reached for my phone. My voice was steady. Hey, it's me. Is everything set for today? Perfect. Go ahead with the arrival in 15 minutes. The helicopter lifted from the front lawn with a rush of wind that bent the maple branches and scattered leaves across the porch. I kept my eyes on the shrinking figures in the doorway. My brother blinking hard, my sister gripping Andrew's arm, my father frozen, and my mother fainting onto the couch. Their disbelief clung to me even as the ground dropped away. Rick's voice crackled through my headset. Everything all right, Miss Parker? You look like you've just stepped out of a hurricane. I gave a short laugh. Something like that. Family storms are the worst kind. Want me to circle a few extra times? He asked, his tone playful. Give them something to gossip about? For a moment, I imagined James grinding his teeth, trying to keep control of his binder while the walls shook from rotor wash. The thought almost tempted me, but I shook my head. No. Straight to the estate. We'll be back for them soon enough. The helicopter banked, pulling away from Cedar Springs. The little town spread beneath us, still wrapped in its amber time capsule. Then the horizon widened, fields and forests unfolding until the hills rose like green shoulders. And there it was, the estate. From the air, the slate roof of the main house gleamed where the sun struck. The stone facade stretched upward, softened by ivy crawling across its walls. Gardens fanned outward in careful symmetry, ending at the edge of the small lake that reflected the pale sky. Beside it, the new helipad lay like a white coin pressed into the grass. The guest cottages stood half hidden in trees, and the west wing of the mansion, my new office extension, gleamed with glass. Rick guided us lower. The rotor wash rippled across the water, sending rings outward. My chest tightened. For years I had hidden the evidence of my success behind modest clothes and polite nods. This house, this property, was the first undeniable marker. The skids touched down, the engine whined, then eased into idle. I pulled the headset off and stepped into the rush of air. Wind whipped my ponytail across my face, tugged at my sweater, stung my eyes. At the edge of the helipad, Margot stood waiting. Tablet in one hand, leather portfolio in the other, her coat snapping against her legs. "How did it go?" she called. I walked toward her, letting the noise die behind me. About as expected. Mom fainted. James looked like someone told him the world was flat. Stephanie nearly crushed Andrew's arm. Margot's mouth curved. "And you?" Trying not to shake before round two. We crossed the gravel path and stepped into the house. The foyer rose above us, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. A crystal chandelier hung like frozen rain, scattering light across marble. Every sound echoed, our footsteps, the quiet rustle of paper as Margot opened the portfolio. "Chef Thomas has lunch nearly ready," she said. "West Wing rooms are prepared. The staff is standing by, and here," she handed me the portfolio. "Everything you asked for." The leather felt cool, smooth beneath my hands. I flipped it open. Tabs marked every section. Trust documents, legal filings, medical care provisions, the charter of the Westbrook Foundation. The faint scent of ink and paper drifted upward. My parents' names were embossed across one page in gold, the trust sealed with raised notary stamps. Years of work distilled into a binder. My proof. I closed it gently. The snap of leather sounded louder than it should. "Are you sure?" Margot asked quietly. "You could still keep this private, ease them into it another way." I shook my head. "If I don't show them clearly, they'll keep believing their story. I need this to be undeniable, not for me." I hesitated, then admitted the truth. "For my parents. They deserve security without debate." Margot nodded. "Then let's make it undeniable." We walked into the dining room. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting patterns on the long, polished table. Chef Thomas was arranging plates with surgical precision. The smell of roasted herbs floated through the air, mingling with fresh bread. Crystal glasses caught the light, throwing fragments across the linen cloth. "Everything's ready for lunch," Thomas said, stepping back. "Thank you," I murmured. My hand brushed the back of a chair, grounding myself. Soon they would sit here, staring at proof they had never expected. From there, we stepped into the living room. Sofas framed a marble coffee table, polished until it gleamed. Beyond the glass wall, the gardens stretched toward the lake, roses nodding in the breeze. I set the portfolio on the table and opened it to the trust section, smoothing the page so the embossed seals faced upward. Margot stood near the windows. "Rick's 10 minutes out," she said after glancing at her tablet. I lowered myself onto the sofa, pressing my palms together until my knuckles whitened. My reflection looked back at me in the window. Sweater plain, hair tied back, face tired but steady. For years I had built walls of silence. Every family holiday I had swallowed their comments, every offer of help laced with condescension, every assumption that my life was fragile, one bad month from collapse. The walls had protected me, but they had also kept me alone. Now the truth sat in a leather binder on the marble table. I thought of my mother's voice yesterday. Healthy. "Are you eating enough on your budget?" I thought of James's smirk as he offered me a real job. Stephanie's pearls flashing as she slid me a gift card. Enough. This wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. It was about taking back my place in the family. Not as a cautionary tale, but as a daughter who could provide. Margot adjusted the drapes slightly, letting more light fall across the portfolio. The chandelier above glittered, its crystals catching the sun. I whispered the words aloud, steadying myself. Family first today. The room was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock. My heartbeat slowed into its rhythm. Then the radio on the console crackled. Rick's voice came through firm and clear. On approach with your family. The low thrum announced them before the helicopter even settled. I waited in the foyer, portfolio on the marble table, sunlight pouring through the tall windows at my back. The front doors opened with a groan of old hinges, and they stepped inside one by one. James was first, his shoes clicking against the polished stone, his head tilted back, eyes running over the chandelier, the sweeping staircase, the echoing height of the room. His jaw worked as if chewing something bitter. Stephanie followed, her mouth literally dropping open, one manicured hand clutching Andrew's sleeve like a lifeline. My father lingered near the threshold, his eyes wide with wonder, while my mother pressed a trembling hand to her chest as though her breath couldn't keep up. "This is yours?" she whispered, voice almost breaking. "Yes, Mom," I said evenly. "Welcome to my home." James's head snapped toward me. "Your home?" The words landed like an accusation. I turned toward the living room, motioning for them to follow. "Come sit. We have a lot to talk about." The living room opened into light, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the gardens and lake beyond. Sofas curved around the marble coffee table, polished to a mirror shine. On it lay the portfolio, leather dark against the stone, a silent weight waiting to be opened. They lowered themselves into the seats hesitantly, as if the cushions might reject them. Andrew scanned the room with his banker's eye, already calculating numbers. Stephanie's pearls gleamed under the sun, but her face was pale. James sat stiffly, arms crossed, his watch catching the light with each fidget of his hand. "Regional office of what?" he demanded. "You keep calling it an estate, a home, an office. What company could possibly—" I sat opposite him, placing my palms on the portfolio. "Parker Security Solutions, my company." Silence cracked open between us. "Your company," James repeated, flat and disbelieving. "I founded it 8 years ago. We developed data protection protocols for small and mid-sized businesses. 6 months ago, Nexus Technologies acquired us for just over $50 million. I retained equity and leadership of the division." The words seemed to bounce off the marble and glass before reaching them. Stephanie blinked rapidly. Andrew leaned forward, lips parted. My father mouthed the number like it might vanish if he didn't hold on to it. "50 million?" he said slowly, voice hushed. "My Allison?" "Yes, Dad." My throat tightened. "You're Allison." My mother's hand trembled as she reached toward the portfolio but stopped short, as if afraid to touch it. "But you never said anything," she whispered. "All these years we thought—" "You thought I was struggling," I finished, "and I let you believe it." Stephanie's voice finally broke the air. "Do you know how worried we were about you? The gift cards, the offers to help—" I raised an eyebrow. "Worried? Or was it easier to believe I had failed? Yesterday, you handed me a card for job interview clothes. Did that come from worry or from comfort with the story you'd written about me?" Color rose in her cheeks. Her fingers fumbled with her pearls. "I was trying to help." "No," I said, my voice sharp in the quiet room. "You were trying to reinforce the role that made sense to you, the sister who couldn't possibly succeed unless she followed your path." James leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You could have told us. Instead, you sat there letting us look like fools. You let us offer you scraps while you were sitting on millions." "I didn't create your assumptions," I replied. "You did that yourselves. Every time I tried to talk about my work, you dismissed it as that computer thing Allison does. You never asked questions that mattered. But the clothes, the taxi, the old bag, those you noticed." My mother's eyes filled with tears. She reached for the portfolio again, this time letting her fingers brush the leather cover. "Is this proof?" "Yes," I said softly. "Please, look." I slid it toward her across the marble. The leather creaked as she opened it. The gold tabs glimmered under the light. Her hand shook so badly that the page corners bent as she turned them. Trust documents, healthcare provisions, the framework of the Westbrook Foundation, all laid out in black ink and stamped seals. "The Westbrook facility you dismissed yesterday?" I said quietly. "That's mine, my project. I funded it after Dad's diagnosis. I wanted something better than the institutional halls you researched, James. I wanted dignity, community, joy, and I arranged for Mom and Dad to have a place there whenever they need it." Stephanie's gasp filled the room. "That was real?" "Yes, real and waiting." James pinched the bridge of his nose, eyes closed tight. When he opened them, his stare cut through me. Do you have any idea how this feels? To discover that the sister we pitied built all of this while we laughed about cereal brands and apartments? I held his gaze. Do you have any idea how it felt to be laughed at in the first place? The chandelier above threw shards of light across his face as he leaned back, silent. My father's hand slid across the table, resting on the page where the trust seals gleamed. His fingers traced the embossed letters of his name. His voice was soft, but it carried more weight than James's binder ever had. "Were you punishing us, Allison?" he asked. The words hit me harder than all the years of mockery. Punishing. I swallowed. My palms pressed flat against my thighs. At first, no. I kept quiet because I wasn't sure it would last. Then it became habit, protection. But I won't lie. Part of me liked imagining the moment when you'd all see. The helicopter, the shock, the proof. Maybe it was petty. Maybe it was punishment. And I regret that. The silence that followed felt heavy, thick as the marble beneath my elbows. My mother's hand still hovered over the pages, trembling. Stephanie stared at me like she was trying to reconcile two different people. James's eyes were dark, unreadable, his jaw tight. My father leaned back slowly, his face lined with something more complicated than anger, something closer to grief. The clock ticked in the corner. The roses beyond the window swayed, and none of us spoke. The silence after my father's question hung thick, pressing against my ribs. The chandelier above us flickered in the afternoon light, scattering shards across the marble coffee table. My mother's hand still rested on the portfolio, trembling against the weight of pages that had rewritten our family story. I inhaled slowly. If there was ever a moment to reclaim the ground I had surrendered for years, this was it. "Dad," I said softly, meeting his clouded eyes. "No, I wasn't trying to punish you. Not really. I was protecting myself. But now it's time I tell you everything, not to prove myself, not to hurt you, but because you deserve to know what I've built, and how it already belongs to all of us." I pulled the portfolio toward me, opening it to the section marked in gold. The Westbrook Foundation. You saw the name on those pages. It isn't just another facility. It's a community of small houses, 6 or 8 residents in each, designed to feel like home. Kitchens where people can cook if they choose. Gardens out back for fresh air, pets, music, familiar rituals. Not sterile halls with numbers on the doors. Stephanie blinked, lips parting. James leaned forward despite himself, his elbows on his knees, eyes narrowing in focus. "Each resident has a personalized care plan," I continued. "Not just medical charts, but life stories, favorite foods, songs, routines. The staff is trained to know people as people, not patients. That's what I wanted for Dad, for Mom, for anyone who deserves dignity at the end of their life." My mother's tears slipped freely now, her hand brushing the page as though it could anchor her. "You thought of all that?" I nodded. 3 years ago, after we secured the patent, I put aside part of my first funding round. I didn't want success, just to be about me. I wanted it to mean something. That's why Westbrook exists. James shifted in his seat, his jaw tight but his voice lower than before. "And the trust? It covers every expense," I said, "for the rest of their lives. Housing, care, medical costs, transitions, everything is already secured. You don't need to shoulder this burden alone, James." But I looked at each of them. This isn't about me taking over. Decisions about our parents' care still belong to all of us, equals. The word landed heavy, deliberate. Stephanie stared at the portfolio, her fingers twisting her pearls. Andrew reached over, gently stilling her hand. James broke the quiet first. He leaned back, arms crossing, then uncrossing, as though even his posture was uncertain. Finally, his voice cracked the silence. "I owe you an apology." My eyes flicked to him. "I made assumptions," he admitted, the words sounding foreign in his mouth. "Assumptions that said more about me than about you. The truth is—" He hesitated, then let out a ragged breath. "I hate at least 60% of my daily life. The meetings, the numbers, the constant performance. I did everything by the book. Ivy League, corner office, country club, and I'm miserable." The admission stunned me more than the accusations had. James never admitted weakness. Mom's lips parted. "James!" He lifted a hand, silencing her gently. "I needed you to fail, Allison, because your different path scared me. If you succeeded, it would mean my sacrifices, my choices, might not be the only way, or the right way. So I told myself you couldn't possibly be happy. That narrative made it easier to keep living my own. The chandelier light caught the moisture in his eyes before he blinked it away. Stephanie swallowed hard, her voice trembling when she spoke. Then maybe I should say something too. She let out a brittle laugh. All those charity galas I post about, the smiling photos, the glossy magazines, they're hollow. Andrew and I... Her voice faltered. Andrew squeezed her hand, finishing for her. We've been in counseling, he said quietly, trying to find meaning beyond appearances. Stephanie nodded, mascara smudging faintly beneath her eyes. I keep wondering what difference I actually make. The galas raise money, yes, but I never see the impact. I want to do something real, something that matters. I leaned forward, my tone soft. Westbrook has an arts program. They'd welcome you. Residents paint, design gardens, create things. They need someone with your eye for beauty, not for magazines, but for lives. Her eyes widened, hope flickering in them for the first time. Andrew cleared his throat. And I've been thinking too. My work is profitable, but it doesn't feed my conscience. I've wanted to move into ethical investment counseling, helping nonprofits grow their resources responsibly. Maybe Westbrook, maybe schools. Something that aligns with values, not just returns. The air in the room shifted. The weight of condescension that had suffocated me for years began to dissolve. Mom dabbed at her cheeks with a tissue. Allison, you've given us more than security. You've given us a chance to see each other honestly. We sat closer now, the distance between the sofas narrowing as if drawn by gravity. Coffee cups that had been untouched were finally lifted, the ceramic warm in our hands. When we set them down, it was slow, deliberate, the clink soft against marble as though no one wanted to break the fragile truth blooming in the room. I wrapped my fingers around my own cup, breathing in the faint steam. This isn't about one of us being right and the other's wrong. It's about finally seeing that success looks different for each of us. We've all been playing roles. James, the corporate star, Stephanie, the social queen, me, the failure who needed saving. None of it was true. James nodded slowly, his shoulders sagging. Equals, he repeated. That's going to take time for me to learn. Stephanie's laugh was watery but real. Maybe for all of us. For a moment, silence returned, but not heavy now, not punishing. Quiet like space clearing. My father cleared his throat, his voice thin but steady. Family systems are complicated. Everyone contributes to the patterns, but they can change, if the will is there. I met his gaze, and for once, there was no judgment in it, only clarity. The sunlight shifted across the marble, warming the gold lettering on the portfolio's cover. I looked at James, at the lines etched deeper on his face than I had noticed before. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. I've been offered something, he said finally, a teaching position at the business school. Less money, more meaning. After everything today, I'm thinking about it seriously. The words hovered, fragile, heavy with possibility. Morning light streamed through the estate's breakfast room, golden and soft, catching the steam rising from fresh coffee. The long table was set with pastries still warm from the oven, bowls of fruit glistening with dew, and omelets folded with precision. The chandelier overhead reflected the sunshine, scattering little sparks of brightness across the plates. We gathered quietly. No binder, no portfolio, no defenses. Just family. James passed the orange juice without being asked, his voice softer than I'd heard in years. So, about Westbrook. When do we make the move? I placed my cup down carefully, letting the warmth seep from my palms. There's no rush. Mom's recovery still needs time. Dad is comfortable here for now, but the rooms are ready whenever you are. We can visit together next week, see which space feels right. Stephanie nodded, her fingers wrapped around a croissant she hadn't touched yet. I'd like that. I want to see where the art program happens. Maybe I could bring some supplies. Andrew leaned in, a slice of melon poised on his fork. And I'd like to meet their finance director. If they're open to ethical investment strategies, I'd be glad to advise. The rhythm was calm. Decisions made without judgment. Input shared without hierarchy. My mother smiled, buttering her pastry with hands that still shook slightly but carried no hesitation. It feels good, she said softly. To plan without fear, to know we'll be cared for. Dad lifted his coffee slowly, steadying the cup before taking a sip, and to know we're part of it, not just subjects of a plan, equals, like you said. The word lingered, warm this time, not heavy. After breakfast, we walked out to the terrace. The lake shimmered under sunlight, ripples scattering like silver coins across its surface. Roses leaned toward the water, their petals catching the breeze. We arranged ourselves on the wide steps, the old tension replaced by something tentative but genuine. The photographer wasn't professional, just Andrew with his phone. But when we leaned together, our smiles were real. No staged perfection, no desperate need to prove. Just siblings, parents, family, caught in a frame that felt honest. Later, as we lingered by the garden gate, my mother looked at me with eyes that were clearer than they'd been all weekend. "Sunday dinner next week?" she asked. "Nothing fancy, just family." I hugged her, breathing in the familiar scent of her lavender soap. "I'd love that," I said. "Just family sounds perfect." When their car disappeared down the drive, the house fell quiet again. I walked back to the terrace alone, the lake stretching before me. Sunlight glanced off the ripples, dazzling and fleeting, like truths that had waited too long to surface. For years, I had built walls of silence, convinced that was the only way to survive their judgment. But walls don't just keep pain out, they keep love out too. The helicopter, the estate, the portfolio, they had forced a confrontation. But what mattered wasn't the shock, it was what came after. The space for honesty, for admission, for the messy truths we'd all hidden. I leaned against the stone railing, breathing in the scent of roses carried by the breeze. True wealth, I realized, wasn't measured in marble tables or balance sheets. It was in moments like this, sitting at breakfast with laughter instead of pity, standing for a photo where the smiles didn't feel brittle, hearing my brother and sister admit they wanted something more. We were fragile now, open in ways we hadn't been before, and vulnerability was terrifying. But it was also the only path to something real. I watched the lake shimmer and thought about the years I'd spent proving myself in silence, waiting for vindication. Vindication had come, yes, but it was the connection that mattered more. Being seen, finally, for who I was. Seeing them, too, beyond the polished veneers and practiced roles. I turned back toward the house, the sun catching on the windows, scattering light across the stone. My chest felt lighter, my steps steadier. And maybe that's why I want to leave you with this. We all have families who underestimate us, who label us, who box us into roles we never asked for. Sometimes we carry those labels for years, too afraid or too tired to fight them. But truth has a way of breaking through. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Have you carried the weight of assumptions that never matched who you really are? I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments. And if my journey resonated with you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Family Power Stories. Together, we can keep telling stories that remind us what truly matters. Not the wealth you can measure, but the connections you can feel. Because at the end of the day, just family really does sound perfect.